She was giving orders, then froze. When I said, "You look amazing today," reaches its climax as Rowan and Commander Voss race against time to eject an unstable reactor. When a collapsing beam threatens Rowan's life, Voss throws herself into danger to save him, whispering, "Don't freeze on me now," echoing his earlier compliment but now with genuine warmth, permanently transforming their relationship amid the chaos. The battlecruiser, Dawn's Vengeance, shuddered as another volley of enemy fire pummeled its shields. Commander Alara Voss stood rigid at the helm, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in the traditional Thalorian military braid that hugged her scalp before cascading down her back. Her voice rang clear over the klaxons and chatter of the bridge crew. "Bring us about to heading 347 Mark 12. Target their forward batteries and prepare to fire on my mark." Around her, the crew responded with practiced efficiency. The massive ship pivoted in space, its thrusters flaring against the darkness. The main view screen displayed the enemy cruiser, a Caraxian vessel bristling with weapon arrays. "Commander," called Lieutenant Mara Kun from the tactical station, her voice tight with tension. "Their lead ship is charging what appears to be a graviton lance." Alara's expression remained impassive. "Divert auxiliary power to forward shields. Hold position." In engineering, 4 decks below, Chief Engineer Rowan Hale cursed as warning lights flashed across his console. He ran a hand through his perpetually disheveled brown hair, eyes darting between the power distribution grid and the reactor output readings. The ship wasn't just taking a beating from outside. Something was wrong internally. "Zhang, watch that coolant pressure," he shouted to his assistant. "Torres, bypass that circuit before it blows." His team scrambled in response, moving with the practiced chaos that defined Rowan's department. Unlike the bridge's militaristic precision, engineering under Rowan's command was a constant improvisation, a symphony of quick fixes and creative solutions that kept the aging battlecruiser functioning beyond its design specifications. A tremendous impact rocked the ship, throwing Rowan against his console. The lights flickered, then dimmed as emergency power kicked in. "Status report," he demanded, pulling himself upright. Torres looked up from her station, face pale in the red emergency lighting. "Primary power coupling to the bridge is failing. We're losing the starboard weapons array." Rowan swore under his breath. "Manual override isn't responding. I need to get up there." He grabbed his toolkit and headed for the door. "Zhang, you're in charge until I get back. Keep that reactor stable or we're all space dust." The journey to the bridge was treacherous. Twice the ship lurched so violently that Rowan was thrown against the corridor walls. By the time he reached the bridge, his uniform was smeared with coolant fluid and his cheek sported a fresh cut. The bridge was a scene of controlled chaos. Through the main viewport, Rowan could see the Caraxian vessel maneuvering for another attack run. Commander Voss stood at the center of it all, her spine straight as a steel rod, issuing commands in rapid succession. "Commander," Rowan called, moving toward the primary systems control panel. "We've got a cascade failure in the power distribution network. The starboard weapons won't respond because—" "Fix it, Engineer Hale." She cut him off without turning, her voice cold and precise. "We need those weapons operational in the next 90 seconds, or we cannot hold our position." Rowan nodded, though she wasn't looking at him, and dropped to his knees beside the panel. He pried off the access cover and plunged his hands into the tangle of circuitry. The bridge crew continued their work around him, voices tense but disciplined as they reported enemy movements, shield integrity, and weapon status. Above him, Commander Voss continued to direct the battle. "Helm, prepare to execute evasive pattern Thalorian 6 on my mark. Lieutenant Kun, target their propulsion systems the moment our weapons come back online." Rowan's fingers worked quickly, bypassing damaged relays and rerouting power through secondary systems. It wasn't elegant, but it would work, at least long enough to get them out of this firefight. As he made the final connection, the console hummed back to life, lights blinking from red to green. "Starboard weapons array back online. Commander," he announced, pushing himself to his feet. "It won't hold forever, but it should get us through this skirmish." For the first time since he'd arrived on the bridge, Commander Voss turned to face him. Her eyes were the pale blue of a gas giant, cold and distant. Her face, with its sharp cheekbones and strong jaw, betrayed no emotion. And yet, in that moment, with her silhouette backlit by the stars and enemy fire, with the strain of command subtly visible in the tightness around her eyes, Rowan was struck by something he'd never noticed before. The words left his mouth before he could think better of them. "You look amazing today, Commander." The bridge fell silent. The tactical officer's fingers froze over her console. The helmsman's mouth dropped open. Even the communications officer stopped mid-transmission. Commander Ilara Voss stood perfectly still. Her lips parted on an unfinished order. Her eyes widened a fraction, the most expression Rowan had ever seen on her face, and a faint flush crept across her cheekbones. For 3 full seconds, she said nothing, did nothing. Just stared at Rowan as though he had suddenly transformed into an alien species before her eyes. The silence was broken by Lieutenant Kuhn's urgent voice. "Commander, the enemy vessel is firing." The ship rocked violently as the impact hit, throwing several crew members against their stations. The jolt seemed to snap Ilara back to the present. She tore her gaze away from Rowan and turned back to the view screen. "Target their propulsion and fire," she ordered, but her voice had lost some of its usual steel. "Helm, execute evasive pattern now." Rowan backed away from the command center, suddenly aware of the enormity of his breach of protocol. The Thalorian military culture prized discipline and formality above all else. Personal comments, especially about appearance, were strictly forbidden, and he had just violated that taboo in the middle of a battle, on the bridge, in front of the entire command crew. As he retreated toward the turbolift, Rowan noticed something else unusual. The ship's weapons had fired late, a delay of at least 2 seconds after the commander's order. In battle, 2 seconds could mean the difference between victory and destruction. "Engineer Hale," Commander Voss called without turning. "Report back to engineering. Ensure the reactor remains stable." "Yes, Commander," he replied, stepping into the turbolift. As the doors closed, he caught one last glimpse of her rigid back, the proud set of her shoulders, and the barely perceptible tremor in her hand as she gripped the command rail. Back in engineering, Rowan found his team working frantically to stabilize the ship's systems. The battle continued for another 20 minutes before the Caraxian vessels finally broke off their attack and retreated to a safe distance. "What happened up there?" Torres asked, as they rerouted power to the damaged sections of the ship. "The weapons response was delayed by almost 3 seconds. We nearly lost the port shield array." Rowan focused intently on the power distribution grid. "I may have said something inappropriate to the commander." Torres raised an eyebrow. "Define inappropriate." "I told her she looked amazing." His assistant's eyes widened. "You did what? To Commander Icevein herself? During battle?" "It just slipped out," Rowan muttered, adjusting a power coupling with more force than necessary. "Well, you're still alive, so that's something," Torres said with a low whistle. "Though I wouldn't count on staying that way once this crisis is over." The ship-wide communication system crackled to life. "Senior officers report to the Strategic Operations Center in 15 minutes, came the commander's voice, as cool and impersonal as ever. Rowan exchanged a glance with Torres. "If I don't come back, the bypass for the secondary coolant system is in my personal files. Password is engineering rules." "It was nice knowing you, Chief," Torres replied with mock solemnity. The Strategic Operations Center was located deep within the ship's core, protected by multiple layers of armor plating. When Rowan arrived, most of the senior staff was already present, gathered around the large holographic display table. Commander Voss stood at the head, reviewing data on a personal tablet. She did not look up when Rowan entered. Our encounter with the Caraxian patrol was not coincidental, she began, once all officers were present. Intelligence suggests they were testing our defenses in preparation for a larger assault. The holographic display activated, showing the star system and the position of various fleet elements. A cluster of red markers appeared at the edge of the display. Long-range sensors have detected a Caraxian battle group moving into position approximately 6 hours from our current location. Their force significantly outnumbers our own. Lieutenant Kun leaned forward, studying the display. We should retreat to the Varian Nebula. The radiation would mask our signature and allow us to regroup with the Fifth Fleet. Commander Voss shook her head. Negative. We have received new orders from High Command. The Dawn's vengeance is to hold position and defend the Leraries outpost until reinforcements arrive. A murmur went through the assembled officers. The outpost was little more than a scientific research station with minimal defensive capabilities. With respect, Commander, said the tactical officer. Our ship sustained significant damage in the skirmish. The starboard weapons array is operating at 60% capacity, and the secondary reactor is showing signs of instability. All eyes turned to Rowan. He cleared his throat. The reactor issue is concerning. The containment field is fluctuating, and we've had to shut down several non-essential systems to compensate. I'll need at least 8 hours to complete repairs. You have 6, Commander Voss replied, without looking at him. Lieutenant Kun will coordinate the defense preparations. Dr. Saran will ensure the medical bay is prepared for casualties. She continued assigning duties to each officer present, her voice methodical and precise. When she reached Rowan, there was the slightest pause. Chief Engineer Hale, you will prioritize repairs to the weapon systems and the reactor containment field. Yes, Commander, Rowan replied, trying to catch her eye, but her gaze remained fixed on the data tablet. Dismissed, she said, and the officers began to file out of the room. Commander, Rowan said, hanging back as the others left. About what happened on the bridge. Engineer Hale, she cut him off, still not meeting his eyes. I expect the reactor to be functioning at optimal capacity within 6 hours. Focus on your duties. Without waiting for a response, she strode from the room, leaving Rowan alone with the slowly rotating holographic display of their precarious tactical situation. The next few hours were a blur of frantic activity. Rowan and his team worked tirelessly to repair the damage to the ship's systems. The secondary reactor proved especially troublesome, its containment field fluctuating dangerously despite their best efforts to stabilize it. We need to replace the entire regulator assembly, Rowan told Torres as they monitored the readings. But we don't have a spare that will fit this configuration. Torres frowned. Could we modify one of the auxiliary power regulators? Rowan shook his head. Different power rating. It would burn out in minutes. He stared at the schematic, mind racing through possibilities. Wait. If we take the regulator from the tertiary life support system and reconfigure it to handle the increased load. That's life support, Chief, Torres reminded him. Kind of important. We only need it to hold for a few hours, Rowan argued. And the primary life support can handle the load if we reduce functionality in the non-essential areas of the ship. Before Torres could respond, the ship-wide communication system activated. Attention all personnel. We have received word that an envoy from the Thalorian High Council will be arriving within the hour to assess our defensive position. All department heads prepare for inspection. Commander Voss out. Rowan and Torres exchanged looks of disbelief. An inspection? Now? With a hostile fleet bearing down on us and half the ship held together with makeshift repairs? Thalorian protocol, Torres said with a shrug. Probably wouldn't postpone an inspection if the ship was actively exploding. Rowan ran a hand through his hair, leaving a streak of grease. Keep working on the reactor. I'll clean up and meet this envoy. An hour later, Rowan stood with the other department heads in the ship's main docking bay as the Thalorian shuttle completed its docking procedures. He had managed to wash his face and change into a clean uniform, though he suspected he still smelled faintly of coolant fluid and ozone. Commander Voss stood at the front of the receiving line, her uniform immaculate, her posture perfect. She had not looked in Rowan's direction once since he arrived. The shuttle's hatch opened with a hiss of equalizing pressure, and a tall, imposing figure emerged. Admiral Thess was a full-blooded Thalorian, his skin the pale blue-gray of his species, his white hair pulled back in an elaborate series of braids that denoted his high rank. His eyes, solid black without discernible pupils, swept over the assembled officers. "Commander Voss," he said, his voice deep and resonant. "The High Council is concerned about the defense of this sector." Alara saluted formally, touching her fist to her opposite shoulder in the Thalorian tradition. "Admiral Thess, the Dawn's Vengeance stands ready to defend Lyraris outpost as ordered." The Admiral returned the salute perfunctorily. "I will require a full briefing on your tactical situation and defensive capabilities." His gaze moved along the line of officers, pausing when he reached Rowan. "You are not Thalorian." "Chief Engineer Rowan Hale, sir," Rowan replied, attempting the Thalorian salute and feeling immediately foolish for doing so. "Human, from Earth Colony Epsilon." "Humans," the Admiral said, the word neither compliment nor insult. "I have heard your species has unconventional approaches to engineering problems." Commander Voss stepped forward smoothly. "Chief Engineer Hale has been instrumental in maintaining the Dawn's Vengeance's operational status, despite limited resources and hostile conditions." It was the first time she had acknowledged Rowan's existence since the incident on the bridge, and he couldn't help but notice she still wouldn't look directly at him. "Indeed," the Admiral replied. "I would be interested to observe these human methods. Engineer Hale, you will accompany me during my inspection of the ship's critical systems." Rowan blinked in surprise. "Of course, Admiral." Commander Voss's expression remained neutral, but Rowan thought he detected a flicker of something, concern, annoyance, in her eyes. "Commander Voss will naturally join us," the Admiral continued. "The rest of you, return to your duties. We must be prepared when the Caraxian fleet arrives." The inspection began in the bridge, where Admiral Thess observed the command operations with critical attention. From there, they proceeded to the tactical center, the medical bay, and finally toward engineering. Throughout, the Admiral directed most of his questions to Rowan, rather than Commander Voss, who walked a half-step behind them, silent and watchful. "Your species has a reputation for adaptability," the Admiral remarked as they approached engineering. "The Thalorian way values tradition and established protocol. There is wisdom in following proven methods." "With respect, Admiral," Rowan replied. "Sometimes new problems require new solutions, especially when resources are limited." "A dangerous philosophy," the Admiral said. "Improvisation introduces variables. Variables introduce risk." They entered engineering, where Rowan's team was still working frantically on the reactor issue. Torres looked up as they entered, her expression shifting from concentration to alarm at the sight of the high-ranking Thalorian. "This is the secondary reactor control center," Rowan explained, leading them to the main monitoring station. "We're currently dealing with fluctuations in the containment field." The Admiral studied the readings with a frown. "These fluctuations exceed acceptable parameters. Why has this not been resolved?" Before Rowan could answer, a shrill alarm sounded from the console. The reactor readings spiked dangerously, and warning lights flashed across the display. "Containment field is collapsing," Torres called out. "We're heading for a cascade failure." Without hesitation, Rowan pushed past the Admiral and Commander Voss, diving for the control panel. His fingers flew over the interface, rerouting power and adjusting field parameters. "The regulator can't handle the load," he muttered. "Torres, Manual override on Junction 7 Alpha. As Torres rushed to comply, Rowan grabbed his toolkit and dropped to the floor, sliding beneath the control console. He pried open an access panel and plunged his hands into the circuitry. "Engineer Hale!" The Admiral's voice came from above, tight with controlled alarm. "What is the protocol for this situation?" "No protocol," Rowan grunted, splicing wires together in a configuration that would have horrified any Thalorian engineer. "Making it up as I go." The reactor readings continued to climb toward critical levels. Commander Voss knelt beside the open panel, her face coming into view as Rowan worked. "Can you stabilize it?" she asked. And for the first time since the bridge incident, she looked directly into his eyes. "I think so," he replied, twisting two incompatible components together and securing them with a clamp from his toolkit. "But it's not going to be pretty." He reached deeper into the access panel, stretching to reach a crucial connection point. His fingers brushed against it, but he couldn't quite reach. Without a word, Commander Voss extended her slender arm into the panel, her fingers finding the connection point with surprising precision. "Like this?" she asked, holding the component steady. "Exactly like that," Rowan confirmed, surprised by her willingness to get her immaculate uniform dirty. "Hold it there while I make the final connection." Their hands worked in tandem, her steady grip complementing his quick, improvisational adjustments. Above them, the alarm's pitch changed, then gradually subsided as the reactor readings began to stabilize. "Field stabilizing," Torres reported from the monitoring station. "We're moving back into safe parameters." Rowan let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "That should hold it. For a while, at least." He slid out from under the console and found himself face to face with Commander Voss, who was also emerging from beneath the panel. A streak of grease marked her cheek, and several strands of hair had escaped her perfect braid. For a moment, neither of them moved. "Commander," Admiral Thessa's voice broke the moment. "I find myself both disturbed and impressed by what I have witnessed. This improvisation very nearly resulted in catastrophe, and yet it also prevented one." Alara rose smoothly to her feet, though Rowan noticed she wiped her hands on a cleaning cloth before resuming her formal posture. "Chief Engineer Hale's methods are unconventional, but effective, Admiral." The Admiral's solid black eyes studied Rowan with new interest. "I will require a human perspective during the upcoming negotiations with the Caraxian delegation. Engineer Hale, you will attend as my technical advisor." Rowan climbed to his feet, startled by the request. "Negotiations? I thought we were preparing for battle." "The High Council prefers to explore diplomatic options before committing to armed conflict," the Admiral replied. "A shuttle carrying Caraxian representatives will arrive in 3 hours. They have requested neutral ground for the discussion. The Lyrares outpost will serve this purpose." Commander Voss frowned. "Admiral, with respect, this could be a trap. The outpost has minimal defenses, and our long-range sensors detected a battle group approaching. A calculated risk. Commander, one Caraxian shuttle poses little threat, and the Dawn's vengeance will remain on high alert. You will accompany us to ensure security protocols are maintained." The Admiral turned and strode from engineering, clearly expecting his orders to be followed without question. As soon as he was out of earshot, Rowan turned to Commander Voss. "Commander, about what happened on the bridge." "This is neither the time nor place." "Engineer Hale." She cut him off, her voice once again cold and distant. But her eyes lingered on his face for a moment longer than necessary before she turned to follow the Admiral. Rowan watched her go, noting the perfect posture had returned, the momentary connection during the reactor crisis already forgotten, or at least firmly suppressed. Torres appeared at his side. "So, you're going to a diplomatic meeting with the enemy. Think they'll be impressed by your way with words?" "Shut up and keep an eye on that reactor," Rowan muttered. "If it fails while I'm gone, I'll haunt you for eternity." 3 hours later, Rowan found himself aboard a shuttle, bound for the Lyraris outpost, seated across from Commander Voss and beside Admiral Thess. The shuttle was small, forcing the three of them into closer proximity than was comfortable, especially given the tension between Rowan and the commander. "The Caraxians are a proud species," Admiral Thess was saying. "They value strength above all else, but they also respect resourcefulness. Engineer Hale, when addressed, you will respond honestly, but avoid technical details that could reveal our vulnerabilities." "I understand, Admiral," Rowan replied, though diplomacy had never been his strong suit. Commander Voss sat rigidly in her seat, eyes focused on the viewport. "The outpost security team has been briefed. They will maintain a discreet presence during the negotiations." The shuttle docked with the small research station that orbited Lyraris. As they disembarked, Rowan was struck by how quiet the outpost seemed. Most of the scientific staff had been evacuated when tensions with the Caraxians escalated, leaving only a skeleton crew to maintain essential functions. They were led to a conference room that had been hastily converted for diplomatic purposes. The station's commander, a nervous-looking Thalorian scientist, greeted Admiral Thess with a formal salute. "The Caraxian shuttle is approaching now. Admiral, they should dock within 10 minutes. "Excellent. Engineer Hale, observe but do not speak unless directly addressed. Commander Voss, position security personnel according to standard protocol." As Commander Voss coordinated with the station's security team, Rowan found himself studying her. Despite the chaos of the past day, she maintained her composure with seemingly effortless dignity. Yet, he had glimpsed something else beneath that rigid exterior. A flash of vulnerability during the reactor crisis. A moment of genuine collaboration. The Caraxian delegation arrived with typical dramatic flair. 4 tall, scaled humanoids entered the conference room, their amber eyes scanning every corner with predatory alertness. Their leader, distinguished by elaborate armor and facial markings, approached the table and inclined his head slightly. "I am Verex, voice of the Caraxian Imperium," he announced, his voice carrying a slight metallic resonance. "We come to discuss the matter of territorial boundaries in this sector." Admiral Thess responded with equal formality, and the negotiations began. Rowan, as instructed, remained silent, observing the subtle power plays and carefully worded demands from both sides. Commander Voss stood slightly behind Admiral Thess, her hand never far from her sidearm. The discussions proceeded tensely, but without incident for nearly an hour. Then, as Admiral Thess was outlining a proposed neutral zone between their territories, the outpost's lights flickered ominously. A moment later, the station's alarm system activated. "What is the meaning of this?" Verex demanded, rising to his feet. The station commander rushed into the room, his face pale. "Admiral, we're detecting a power surge in the main reactor. Systems are failing throughout the station." Commander Voss immediately moved to a communication panel. "Dawn's Vengeance. This is Commander Voss. Status report." Static was her only answer. Rowan's engineering instincts kicked in. "Something's interfering with communications, and that power surge isn't random. It has the hallmarks of a directed energy weapon." Verex hissed, reptilian eyes narrowing. "You accuse the Imperium of treachery? Our battle group remains at the arranged distance." Another violent power fluctuation rocked the station, sending several people stumbling. The lights failed completely, plunging the room into darkness before emergency lighting activated with a dull red glow. "The station's life support systems are failing," the station commander reported, checking a handheld diagnostic device. "Estimated 2 hours before oxygen levels become critical." Admiral Thess turned to Verex. "Is this the work of your people? We have nothing to gain by sabotaging these talks." The Caraxian leader retorted. "My shuttle reported unusual energy readings as we approached. Perhaps your human engineer could make himself useful instead of casting accusations." All eyes turned to Rowan. Commander Voss gave him a slight nod. Permission to take action. I need to see the main engineering section, Rowan said. Something's wrong with the power distribution system. I will accompany you, Commander Voss stated, then turned to Admiral Thess. With your permission, Admiral. The Admiral nodded. Go. Resolve this quickly. The situation grows more precarious by the minute. Rowan and Commander Voss hurried through the dimly lit corridors of the outpost. Emergency bulkheads had sealed several sections, forcing them to take a circuitous route to engineering. This isn't a random malfunction, Rowan said as they jogged down a narrow passageway. The pattern of system failures suggests sabotage. Commander Voss nodded grimly. I concur. The timing is too convenient. They reached a sealed door marked Engineering Control. The access panel beside it was dark. The power cut. Manual override, Commander Voss said, locating a small panel beside the door. She pried it open to reveal a hand crank. Together, they turned the heavy mechanism, slowly, forcing the door to slide open far enough for them to slip through. The engineering section was deserted. The monitoring stations dark, except for a few emergency displays. Rowan moved immediately to the main console and attempted to activate it. Backup power only, he muttered. But that should be enough to... He stopped abruptly, staring at the diagnostic readout that appeared on the screen. This can't be right. Commander Voss looked over his shoulder. What is it? The station's navigation system has been compromised. We're moving. Moving where? Rowan's fingers flew over the console, bringing up navigational data. Toward a gravitational anomaly at the edge of the system. If we continue on this trajectory, the station will be torn apart in less than an hour. Commander Voss's eyes widened slightly, the closest thing to alarm Rowan had ever seen on her face. Can you alter our course? The navigation controls aren't responding. Something, or someone, has locked them out. Rowan moved to another console. There's a virus in the system. It's overriding manual controls and directing us toward the anomaly. A virus would require direct access to the station's core systems, Commander Voss said, her mind working through the implications. A saboteur? Not necessarily. The virus could have been introduced through an external transmission, a targeted attack designed to activate during the negotiations. Rowan studied the code scrolling across the screen. This is sophisticated. I can't break through it from here. We need to access the core directly. Where is it? 2 levels down. But with the bulkhead sealed and internal transportation offline, we'll have to find another way. Rowan looked up at the ceiling. The maintenance tunnels. They run throughout the station, bypassing the main corridors. Commander Voss nodded. Lead the way. Rowan pried open an access panel in the ceiling, revealing a narrow service tunnel. He pulled himself up, then extended a hand to help Commander Voss. She hesitated for only a moment before accepting his assistance, her hand cool and strong in his grip. They crawled through the cramped tunnels, guided by Rowan's engineering knowledge of standard outpost design. The air grew warmer as they progressed, the environmental systems clearly failing. So, Rowan said as they navigated a particularly narrow section. About what happened on the bridge. Engineer Hale, Commander Voss replied, her voice echoing slightly in the confined space. We are currently crawling through a maintenance tunnel on a sabotage station heading towards certain destruction. Is this really the time? Might be the only time, considering the circumstances, Rowan pointed out. And I'd rather not die with this awkwardness between us. There was a long pause before she responded. Your comment was inappropriate and violated protocol. I know, and I'm sorry for the timing and the setting, but I'm not sorry for the sentiment. Rowan paused at a junction, considering their route. This way. They continued in silence for several minutes before Commander Voss spoke again, her voice softer than usual. No one has spoken to me that way in over 200 years. Rowan nearly banged his head on the tunnel ceiling in surprise. 200? How old are you? Thalorians have extended lifespans compared to humans. I am in my 3rd century. There was a hint of something almost like amusement in her voice. Does that disturb you? No, I didn't realize. Rowan shook his head, refocusing on their goal. We're almost there. The core access should be just ahead. They emerged from the maintenance tunnel into a small, dimly lit chamber. At its center stood a cylindrical structure pulsing with blue light, the station's computational core. Rowan immediately moved to the control panel beside it. The virus has infected the entire navigation system. It's rerouting commands through encrypted channels. I need to isolate it and purge the system. Can you do it? Commander Voss asked, watching as his fingers moved rapidly over the interface. I can try, but standard procedures won't work against something this complex. Rowan thought for a moment, then smiled grimly. Time for some human improvisation. Instead of attempting to remove the virus directly, Rowan began creating a secondary routing system, essentially building a parallel navigation control that would bypass the infected pathways. This isn't how it's supposed to be done, he explained as he worked. But if I can't beat the virus, I can go around it. Commander Voss watched intently. That approach would never occur to a Thalorian engineer. We are trained to follow established protocols, to perfect existing systems, rather than create new ones. Sometimes the rules don't work, Rowan said, not looking up from his task. Sometimes you have to trust your instincts. Like telling your commanding officer she looks amazing during battle? There was definitely a trace of dry humor in her voice now. Rowan glanced up, surprised, and found her watching him with an inscrutable expression. Exactly like that. A sudden violent shudder ran through the station, nearly throwing them both off their feet. Commander Voss grabbed the edge of the console to steady herself. We're entering the anomaly's gravitational field, she said. How much longer? Almost there, Rowan replied, his fingers moving even faster. I just need to... The console suddenly sparked, and he jerked his hands back with a cry of pain. Commander Voss was at his side instantly. You're injured. Rowan looked down at his palms, now covered in electrical burns. It's fine. I can still finish this. You cannot work effectively with injured hands, she stated. Tell me what to do. Commander, no offense, but Thalorian engineering methods won't... I did not ask for your opinion. Engineer Hale. She cut him off. I asked for instructions. The station has less than 30 minutes before structural integrity fails. Tell me what to do. Recognizing the steel in her voice, Rowan nodded. Okay. See that sequence there? You need to reroute it through the tertiary backup system. Commander Voss stepped to the console, her movements precise and controlled. Under Rowan's guidance, she began implementing his unorthodox solution, her disciplined approach, lending efficiency to his creative design. Now connect those two pathways. No, not like that. You need to bypass the security protocol first. That violates standard operating procedures, she pointed out, even as her fingers moved to follow his instructions. Standard procedures are what got us into this mess. Trust me. Their eyes met briefly, and after a moment's hesitation, she nodded and continued with the bypass. They worked in synchronized harmony, his innovation guided by her precision, as the station continued to shudder around them. Alarms blared in distant sections as structural integrity began to fail in the outer modules. One last connection, Rowan directed. Link the emergency propulsion system directly to the new navigation controls. Commander Voss completed the task, and the console hummed with renewed energy. The navigation display flickered, then stabilized, showing their position relative to the gravitational anomaly. It worked, she said, surprise evident in her voice. We have control again. Not quite, Rowan replied, examining the readout. We've stopped the advance toward the anomaly, but we're still caught in its gravitational pull. We need more power to break free. Another violent tremor shook the station, stronger than before. A support beam crashed down nearby, narrowly missing them. "The structural integrity field is failing," Commander Voss reported, checking another display. "We have less than 10 minutes." Rowan's mind raced through possibilities. "There's one option left. If we reroute power from life support to the propulsion system, we might generate enough thrust to escape the anomaly's pull. That would leave us with approximately 7 minutes of oxygen," Commander Voss calculated. "Not enough time to reach safety. If we succeed, we can restore life support once we're clear. If we fail..." Rowan shrugged. "Well, we'll have bigger problems than lack of air." Commander Voss considered for only a moment before nodding. "Do it." Rowan began the power transfer, his injured hands making the process slower and more painful than it should have been. Commander Voss watched him struggle briefly, then gently moved him aside. "Guide me," she said simply. Together, they completed the rerouting. The lights dimmed further as life support systems went offline, and the air immediately felt thinner. But the propulsion readout showed a significant power increase. "Engaging thrusters now," Commander Voss announced, activating the newly powered engines. The station groaned as opposing forces pulled at its structure, the anomaly's gravity drawing them in, the thrusters pushing them away. Rowan and Commander Voss watched the navigational display in tense silence, tracking their agonizingly slow movement. "It's not enough," Rowan said after a moment. "We're still being pulled in." He studied the readout again. "Wait. There's one more power source we haven't tapped, the emergency reactor for the research labs. If we can access that." "Where is it located?" "2 modules over, but with the bulkhead sealed and structural integrity failing." Rowan met her eyes. "It would be dangerous." "More dangerous than certain destruction?" Commander Voss asked with a raised eyebrow. "Show me the way." They returned to the maintenance tunnels, moving as quickly as possible in the confined space. The air grew noticeably thinner, and Rowan found himself having to pause occasionally to catch his breath. Commander Voss, with her Thalorian physiology better adapted to low oxygen environments, moved steadily ahead. "The research lab should be just beyond this section," Rowan said as they approached a junction. "But I'm reading massive structural damage in that area. It might not be..." His warning came too late. As Commander Voss moved forward, the tunnel section ahead suddenly buckled. With lightning reflexes, she threw herself backward just as the metal collapsed, nearly crushing her. "Are you all right?" Rowan asked, reaching for her in the dim emergency lighting. "I am unharmed," she replied, though he noticed she was holding her arm at an odd angle. "But our path is blocked." Rowan examined the collapsed section. "We can't get through this way. We need another route." "There is no time," Commander Voss said, checking her chronometer. "The station will begin breaking apart in less than 5 minutes. Rowan thought frantically. "There's still the direct route through the main corridor. If we can override the emergency bulkhead..." They backtracked quickly, descending from the maintenance tunnel into a main corridor. As expected, a massive emergency bulkhead blocked their path. "The manual override won't work with the power diverted," Rowan said, examining the sealed doorway. "We need to short-circuit the locking mechanism." He pried open the control panel and began rewiring the circuits, working as quickly as his injured hands would allow. Commander Voss stood guard, her sidearm drawn, alert for any sign of the saboteur who might still be aboard. "Almost got it," Rowan muttered as he connected the final wires. The bulkhead shuddered, then slowly began to retract. As the opening widened, a warning siren blared. "Caution! Depressurization imminent," announced the station's automated system. "Explosive decompression detected in Research Module Alpha." "The module's been breached," Rowan realized with horror. "If we open this bulkhead fully, the decompression will pull us both into space." Commander Voss holstered her weapon and moved to his side. "Can we seal ourselves in the research lab once we reach it?" "If the emergency doors are still functional, yes. But getting there will be like running into a hurricane." Another violent tremor shook the station, throwing them both against the wall. The bulkhead's opening mechanism groaned under the strain. "We have no choice," Commander Voss said. "On my mark, open the bulkhead fully. We will have approximately 3 seconds to reach the laboratory before the decompression force becomes too strong to resist." Rowan nodded, positioning himself at the control panel. "Ready." Commander Voss stood poised to move, her body tense with preparation. 3, 2, 1, mark. Rowan triggered the full opening sequence. The bulkhead slid open with a hydraulic hiss, and immediately they felt the pull of escaping atmosphere. They launched themselves forward, running against the increasing force of the decompression. The corridor ahead was a scene of destruction. Loose equipment flew past them toward the breach, and the roar of escaping air was deafening. 20 meters ahead, Rowan could see the entrance to the research lab, its door partially open. The pull of the decompression grew stronger with each step. Rowan found himself leaning forward at an extreme angle just to make progress. Beside him, Commander Voss moved with grim determination, her injured arm clutched tightly to her side. They were halfway to the lab when a large piece of equipment torn loose by the decompression hurled toward them. Commander Voss saw it first and shoved Rowan aside, taking the brunt of the impact on her already injured arm. She stumbled, but kept moving. "Commander!" Rowan shouted against the roar of escaping air. "Keep moving!" she commanded, her voice barely audible over the chaos. They reached the lab entrance, fighting against the increasing pull. Rowan lunged for the interior control panel and activated the emergency seal. The door began to close, agonizingly slowly. With a final, desperate effort, they threw themselves through the narrowing opening. The door sealed behind them with a solid thunk, cutting off the deafening roar of the decompression. Inside the lab, they collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath in the rapidly thinning air. Rowan looked over at Commander Voss, who was now cradling her arm against her chest, her face tight with pain, but otherwise composed. "Let me see," he said, moving closer to examine her injury. "It is irrelevant at present," she replied, already pushing herself to her feet. "Where is the emergency reactor?" Rowan reluctantly turned his attention to their mission. "Over there, behind that shielding." The laboratory's emergency reactor was a compact unit designed to power critical experiments in the event of main power failure. Rowan moved to the control panel and began the process of rerouting its power to the station's propulsion system. "This will give us the extra thrust we need," he explained as he worked. "But once I initiate the power transfer, this reactor will go critical within minutes. We'll need to evacuate this module immediately." Commander Voss nodded, scanning the room. "There is an emergency escape pod attached to this laboratory. Standard research station design includes one per module." "Good. We can use that to return to the central hub once we've started the power transfer." Rowan completed the final connections. "Ready? Once I activate this, we'll have approximately 2 minutes before the reactor goes critical." Commander Voss moved to the escape pod access hatch and prepared it for launch. "Ready?" Rowan took a deep breath of the thinning air and activated the power transfer. Immediately, the reactor's hum increased to a worrying whine, and warning lights flashed across the control panel. "Power transfer successful," he announced. "The station should now have enough thrust to break free of the anomaly." As if in response, they felt a subtle shift in the station's movement, a lessening of the shuddering vibrations as the enhanced propulsion system began to counteract the anomaly's pull. "It's working," Commander Voss confirmed, checking a status display. "We are beginning to move away from the anomaly's event horizon. Escape pod is ready." Rowan joined her at the escape pod hatch. "After you, Commander." She shook her head. "The reactor. Someone must ensure it remains stable long enough for the station to clear the anomaly's gravitational field." "What? No, we're both leaving. The reactor will hold." The power transfer created a feedback loop in the reactor's containment system, she explained calmly. Without manual adjustment, It will fail before we achieve escape velocity. You must take the escape pod and return to the central hub." "Absolutely not," Rowan protested. "I'll stay and stabilize the reactor." "You're injured, and you're the commanding officer." "This is not a negotiation. Engineer Hale," she said, her voice taking on the familiar tone of command. "As you pointed out, I am the commanding officer, and I am ordering you to take the escape pod. With all due respect, Commander, your order is refused." Rowan crossed his arms. "I'm the engineer. This is my job." For a long moment, they stared at each other, neither willing to back down. Then, to Rowan's shock, Commander Alara Voss smiled, a small, subtle curve of her lips that nonetheless transformed her face. "You are the most infuriating human I have ever encountered," she said, and there was something almost like fondness in her voice. Before Rowan could respond, the reactor emitted a shrill warning tone. The containment field was beginning to fluctuate dangerously. "There's no time to argue," he said. "We'll both stay. Between us, we can keep it stable long enough." Commander Voss hesitated, then nodded sharply. "Very well. Direct me." They moved to the reactor controls, working in tandem, as they had in the core room. Rowan's engineering knowledge combined with Commander Voss's precision as they fought to maintain the delicate balance of the increasingly unstable reactor. Containment field holding at 60%. Commander Voss reported, "Station velocity increasing. Estimated time to clear anomaly's influence, 90 seconds. "The reactor won't last that long without additional support," Rowan said, studying the readings. "The coolant system is failing." He looked around the laboratory and spotted a piece of experimental equipment in the corner. "That cryogenic stabilizer. We can use it to supplement the coolant system." Commander Voss moved to retrieve the equipment, but as she did, a particularly violent tremor shook the module. The ceiling above Rowan began to buckle, a support beam twisting free of its moorings. "Rowan!" Commander Voss's voice cut through the chaos, using his first name for the first time. He looked up to see the beam plummeting toward him, and then a blur of movement as Commander Voss launched herself across the room, shoving him clear with all her strength. The beam crashed down, catching her a glancing blow as she tried to roll away. Rowan scrambled to her side. "Alara!" She lay on the floor, dazed but conscious, a gash across her forehead seeping blue-tinged blood. "The reactor," she managed to say. "Don't freeze on me now." The echo of his own words from the bridge almost made him smile despite the dire situation. "Not a chance," he promised, helping her to her feet. Together, they staggered back to the reactor controls. The station's vibrations were lessening as they gradually pulled away from the anomaly's gravitational field. But the reactor was now emitting an ominous, high-pitched whine. "Containment field at 40% and dropping," Commander Voss reported, wiping blood from her eye. "Station velocity increasing. 30 seconds to clear the anomaly." "The reactor won't hold that long," Rowan said grimly. "We need to eject it before it goes critical." "Ejection mechanism is offline with main power diverted," she replied. Rowan thought frantically. "The manual override. There should be an emergency release in case of containment failure." He located the manual ejection controls, a physical lever sealed behind a protective cover. The warning lights on the reactor had now turned a deep crimson, the whine escalating to a painful screech. 10 seconds to clear the anomaly," Commander Voss announced. Rowan broke the seal on the protective cover and gripped the ejection lever. "When I pull this, we'll have approximately 5 seconds before the explosive bolts detach this section of the module. We need to be in that escape pod." Commander Voss nodded, already moving toward the pod hatch. "Ready?" Rowan pulled the lever with all his strength. Alarm klaxons blared as the station's automated system announced, "Warning! Reactor ejection initiated. Clear the area immediately." They ran for the escape pod, diving through the hatch as the countdown reached its final seconds. Commander Voss sealed the hatch behind them and activated the launch sequence just as a series of explosive charges detonated, separating the reactor section from the rest of the module. The escape pod shot away from the research module, its small thrusters pushing it toward the central hub of the station. Through the viewport, they watched as the ejected reactor section tumbled away into space, and then erupted in a brilliant flash of light as the containment field finally failed. The shockwave hit their tiny pod, sending it spinning wildly for several terrifying moments before the stabilizers managed to compensate. When they regained visual contact with the station, they could see it continuing to move steadily away from the gravitational anomaly, now safely beyond its pull. In the confined space of the escape pod, Rowan and Commander Voss sat side by side, breathing heavily in the recycled air. Her shoulder pressed against his, and neither made any move to increase the distance between them. "You called me Alara," she said after a long moment of silence. Rowan glanced at her, noting the blue blood still trickling from the cut on her forehead. "You called me Rowan first," he pointed out, "and then you saved my life." "A calculated risk," she replied, but there was a warmth in her voice that belied the formal words. "You are a valuable asset to the ship." "Just the ship?" She turned to look at him directly, her pale blue eyes meeting his with an intensity that made his breath catch. "You are unique, Engineer Hale. Your methods defy all Thalorian principles of order and protocol, and yet they are effective. Perhaps there is wisdom in improvisation." It was as close to a compliment as he was likely to get, and Rowan couldn't help but smile. High praise from a Thalorian commander. "Do not become accustomed to it," she warned, but the corner of her mouth twitched in what might have been the ghost of a smile. The escape pod's communication system crackled to life. "Commander Voss, Engineer Hale, do you copy?" came Admiral Thess's voice. "The station has cleared the anomaly's field. Report status." Commander Voss activated the response channel. "Admiral, this is Commander Voss. Engineer Hale and I are returning to the central hub via escape pod. The sabotage has been neutralized, and the station is now stable." "Excellent work, Commander. The Caraxian delegation has provided valuable intelligence. It seems the sabotage was the work of a shadow cell attempting to derail our negotiations. Both our peoples were targeted by this third party." "Understood, Admiral. We will dock with the central hub in approximately 5 minutes." "Very good. Dawn's Vengeance is preparing to rendezvous with the station. Admiral Thess out." As the communication ended, Commander Voss turned her attention to the pod's navigation system, making minor adjustments to their approach vector. Rowan watched her work, noting the calm precision of her movements despite her injuries. "You know," he said casually, "for someone who's been giving orders for 200 years, you adapted pretty quickly to my unorthodox methods." She glanced at him, one eyebrow raised. "And, for someone who speaks without thinking, you demonstrated remarkable focus when necessary. I guess we make a good team." "Perhaps," she conceded, "though your comment on the bridge was still highly inappropriate." "But true," Rowan said with a grin. "You did look amazing. You always do." To his surprise, a faint blue flush crept across her cheekbones. Thalorians do not typically exchange such personal observations. Maybe they should. Might make those 200-year lifespans more interesting. The escape pod docked with the central hub with a gentle thud. Before the hatch opened, Commander Voss turned to Rowan one last time. "Your wound requires attention," she said, gesturing to his burned hands. "Report to the medical bay immediately upon our return to the Dawn's Vengeance." "Yes, Commander," he replied, the formal address feeling strange after their shared ordeal. She hesitated, then added in a softer voice, "And Engineer Hale." "Rowan, thank you." The hatch opened before he could respond, revealing Admiral Thess and a contingent of security officers waiting to escort them back to the ship. Commander Voss immediately resumed her formal posture, all traces of their moment of connection hidden behind her professional demeanor. Back aboard the Dawn's Vengeance, Rowan spent several hours in the medical bay as Dr. Saren treated his electrical burns. By the time he was released, the ship had already departed from the Lyraris outpost, leaving a small security detachment behind to protect the scientists who would eventually return. He returned to engineering to find his team had completed most of the critical repairs in his absence. Torres approached as he entered, her expression curious. "So, you survived diplomatic negotiations and a sabotaged space station," she remarked. "And more importantly, you survived Commander Voss. The crew is saying you two worked together to save the outpost." "We did what was necessary," Rowan replied, not quite ready to discuss the subtle shift in his relationship with the commander. "Uh-huh." Torres didn't look convinced. "Well, while you were playing hero, we managed to stabilize the secondary reactor and restore the starboard weapons array to 80% capacity. The Caraxian fleet has withdrawn to their territory, and we're on course to rendezvous with the Fifth Fleet." "Good work," Rowan said, genuinely impressed. "I knew you could handle things." Torres grinned. "Does that mean I get a promotion when Commander Voss finally has you ejected into space for insubordination?" "Very funny. Get back to work." As Torres returned to her station, Rowan's communicator chimed with a private message. "Engineer Hale, report to the commander's quarters at 2100 hours. Commander Voss." Rowan stared at the message, a mix of apprehension and curiosity washing over him. Commander's quarters. Not the bridge or the Strategic Operations Center. This was unusual. At precisely 2100 hours, Rowan stood outside Commander Voss's quarters, his freshly pressed uniform a stark contrast to his usual disheveled appearance. He hesitated only briefly before signaling his presence. "Enter," came her voice from within. The door slid open to reveal a surprisingly austere space. Unlike the personalized quarters of most long-serving officers, Commander Voss's living area contained few decorations or personal touches. A collection of ancient-looking weapons hung on one wall, and a single holographic image of what appeared to be a Thalorian city floated on a small display table. Commander Voss stood by the viewport, gazing out at the stars. She had changed from her standard uniform into a more formal Thalorian robe, deep blue with silver insignia denoting her rank. Her hair was still in its customary braid, though looser than usual, with a few strands framing her face. The cut on her forehead had been treated, leaving only a faint blue line. "Engineer Hale," she acknowledged, turning to face him. "Thank you for your promptness." "Commander," he replied with a nod. "You wanted to see me?" "Yes." She gestured to a small sitting area. "Please, be seated." As Rowan took the offered seat, he noticed a bottle of what appeared to be Thalorian spirits and two glasses on the table between them. Commander Voss sat across from him, her posture still formal, but somehow less rigid than usual. "Our encounter at the Lyraris outpost was instructive," she began, her eyes studying him with careful attention. "Your methods, while unorthodox, proved effective in a crisis situation." "Thank you, Commander," Rowan replied, unsure where this was leading. She was silent for a moment, then continued. "In 217 years of service, I have adhered strictly to Thalorian protocols and traditions. Our ways have served us well for millennia. Order, discipline, hierarchy. These are the foundations of our society. They've clearly worked for you," Rowan acknowledged. "The Dawn's Vengeance is one of the most efficient ships in the fleet." "Indeed. And yet—" She paused, seeming to consider her words carefully. "Recent events have suggested that there may be value in alternative approaches, in adaptation, in improvisation." She reached for the bottle and poured a small amount of the iridescent blue liquid into each glass. "This is Thalorian Saria, traditionally shared between warriors who have faced death together." Rowan accepted the offered glass, surprised by the gesture. "I'm honored, Commander." "Alara," she corrected quietly. "When we are not on duty, in private, you may call me Alara." He couldn't hide his surprise. "That's quite a concession for a Thalorian officer." "Yes," she agreed, the ghost of a smile touching her lips. "But, as you have demonstrated, sometimes concessions lead to unexpected strengths." She raised her glass slightly. "To successful improvisation." Rowan smiled and raised his own glass. "To successful improvisation." They drank, the spirit burning pleasantly as it went down. Rowan watched as Alara set her glass down and reached up to her hair. With deliberate movements, she loosened her braid further, allowing a lock of silver-streaked hair to fall freely. "In Thalorian culture," she explained, seeing his questioning look, "the warrior's braid is a symbol of discipline and control. To loosen it in the presence of another is a sign of trust, of connection." Rowan understood the significance of the gesture. "I'm honored by your trust, Alara, and I promise not to abuse it by complimenting you on the bridge again." This time her smile was unmistakable, small but genuine. "Perhaps not on the bridge," she conceded. "But here, such observations might be acceptable." Before Rowan could respond, the ship's communication system activated. "Commander Voss to the bridge. Long-range sensors have detected an unidentified fleet approaching our position." The moment of connection was broken. Alara was instantly on her feet, the commander once again. "Acknowledged. On my way." She turned to Rowan. "Duty calls. Engineer Hale." "So it does, Commander," he replied, standing as well. As they moved toward the door, she paused and turned to face him. "This conversation is not concluded, Rowan. Merely postponed." "I look forward to continuing it," he said sincerely. She nodded, then reached up to retighten her braid. But before she could complete the action, Rowan gently caught her hand. "Leave it," he suggested, "as a reminder that sometimes improvisation works." For a moment, he thought he had overstepped. Then, to his surprise, she lowered her hand, leaving the loosened lock of hair framing her face. "Very well," she agreed. "A small improvisation." Together, they headed for the bridge, commander and engineer, different in almost every way imaginable. And yet, as the upcoming battle would prove, stronger together than either could be alone. And, as they took their positions, ready to face whatever challenges the universe had in store, Rowan couldn't help but notice how the starlight caught in her silver-streaked hair, making her look, indeed, amazing.